Excerpt from the Massetti Prime Gazette, translated to human units based on your location. Dear readers, I know that many of you must think that this job is remarkably easy. I get paid to travel to strange and wonderful far-off places, to report on interesting people, and the paper covers most every expense I can dream up. But I tell you this, you valued, yet incorrect, readers. My job is difficult. Not only am I exposing myself to all sorts of unknown dangers while traveling and reporting, risking my editor refusing to reimburse my meals, but also, it is simply exhausting to report on some species, particularly humans, whom so many of you appear to be very interested in. Their high-gravity worlds are especially troublesome. I can't walk for more than a few hours each day before becoming exhausted and resting for an extended time. Which is why I was so worried about traveling to their largest exposition on the latest and greatest technological marvels created by their companies, Tech Expo 147, held each year on Earth itself. But my editor insisted, and after confirming that the tickets and event badge were non-refundable, I packed my things and headed for the human homeworld to see what marvels they could create. Tech Expo, like most human endeavors, is a pretty much human-only affair. This is not due to any sort of official policy. Just the simple fact that not many other species could bother standing in their gravity for too long rules out most visitors from the greater galactic core. And Tech Expo is a week-long event. There's simply too much to see, and even if I had the stamina of a human, I doubt I would be able to see even half of what was on display during the convention. But I put on a brave face and set myself to see as much as I could. And besides, I'm in quite good shape after spending all these months on human worlds all throughout this corner of the galaxy. I should be able to last a little while on Earth. Stepping off the transport, I was unexpectedly greeted at the gate by a human woman, holding a sign with my name on it. "Hello Mr. Valken," she started in excellent, yet strangely accented core common, and using the human honorific for males. "My name is Mayhan, and I've been asked to be your chauffeur for the duration of your visit to Tech Expo." I wasn't ungrateful for someone to take my bags, but I was completely in the dark as to who had sent this chauffeur. Why, Dr. Serena Orlander, of course, from the ALSL too. We corresponded quite thoroughly with your office on Massetti Prime in order to make the necessary arrangements. May explained. On the way to the car, she elaborated some more to get me up to speed. It turned out that the ALSL had extended an invitation to the Gazette to send me to exposition in order to gain a guaranteed platform to showcase their technology to the rest of the galaxy. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, someone at the Gazette forgot to tell me any of this critical information. And truthfully, they're lucky I was got on the transport to Earth at all. May assured me that my bags were being seen to as she escorted me through the mind-bogglingly large and eerily empty convention hall to the ALSL's display room. Along the way, I learned that I was visiting on the day before the convention officially opened, so the ALSL team could give me their nearly full attention as they finished up their preparations for the show. As May drove the small electric cart we rode in, I tried to steal peeks at the hundreds of booths that lined the main exhibition avenues. They really were like avenues, sidewalks and all. On human colonies, there are entire cities smaller than this exhibition hall. Entering the ALSL room, I was immediately concerned. The room was practically empty. One or two other humans were fiddling with displays, or just waiting around, presumably for Dr. Orlander. I expressed this to May, and was simply told that Dr. Orlander would be happy to answer any questions I had when she arrived. I busied myself by slowly walking around the large room and reading the material they had displayed on the walls. Most of the information was on adaptive learning and choice decision analysis. At the defense of Massetti Prime, I witnessed human warrior drones fighting with great effectiveness, and I considered how enhanced decision-making processes would aid these robots. The machines I had seen in human civilian life didn't really impress me much more than any other race's creations, mostly consisting of mobile computers or well-programmed human-shaped machines. I wondered aloud to one of the other jobless guests in the room, what could be so impressive that ALSL needed such a large room for display? And they just murmured something non-committal and shrugged. Dr. Serena Orlander walked into the room surrounded by a small group of people, all frantically trying to get signatures on forms, talking on mobile devices, or checking calendars and schedules. Without slowing her pace, she looked around the room and made immediately for me, leaving her entourage waiting in the doorway. "Haltel Valken," she opened pleasantly, "I'm so happy you could be here to witness our latest developments." I told her that I was very interested to see what humans were so eager to show off to the rest of the galaxy. Especially now that slow steps were being taken to integrate them into more active trade with the GGC. And with that opening, she started her pitch. "Haltel, you've been living among humans for a few months now. I think you've noticed that we humans like to effect change on our environment to better suit our needs. We like things to be more, well, human. And ever since we first created computers, we wanted to be able to interact with them on an intuitive social level. Close approximations always seem just a little bit off to us. Now, I will answer your question, but first I want you to meet someone." And with that she beckoned one of the few other people in the room who was standing just off the side waiting. This new human walked over to us and extended his hand, which I shook as he introduced himself. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Valken. I hope this isn't too overwhelming for you." "I mean, the building is massive, but without any crowds, it's actually quite nice inside. I don't see what." I started to reply to the new person whose hand I was still grasping when I had the strangest realization. Every species is designed and raised to recognize its own kind and learns to tell the difference between a drawing and the real thing. After spending extended time with other species, we may be able to pick up on the differences that they use to identify themselves that are different from our own markers. When I first started living with humans, I was alarmed by the animatronic mannequins in store windows advertising products, as I thought they were actual people. But I learned to see the differences after a short time. And I was picking up some subtle signals from this new human that was just ever so slightly not human. As I took a second look at the stranger's face, it let go of my hand and a resigned smile spread across its mouth as it turned to Dr. Orlander. "He's pretty quick. I think you won our little bet." Dr. Orlander smiled genuinely, first at the stranger, growing stranger by the second, then at me. "I think you were tipped off by Al's less than subtle opening line, if I am not mistaken. Haltel, allow me to introduce you to ALS, short for Artificial Learning System, the lab's first completely sentient artificial person." Al smiled. "Overwhelmed yet?" it said cheekily, and at that, all its skin pigment faded away, leaving only a translucent face-shaped cover over incredibly complicated servos and sensors that lurked underneath. "I'm sorry, what? An artificial person? That's not possible." I may have overreacted a little, dear readers, but I don't believe that any of you would have been any more level-headed given the same circumstances. Dr. Orlander frowned. "Why isn't it possible? We've had sentient computers for a few decades. But they've all been confined to server farms and are pretty much immobile, only living within the worlds or limited by the senses we gave to them. The ALSL has finally taken the next step. ALS is completely sentient, like you or me. It learns, dreams, and desires like everyone else. Just because it's not made of meat and can only eat electricity doesn't make it not a person." This response surprised me. Dr. Orlander seemed to be suggesting and presenting evidence towards the fact that human computer science, especially with regard to AIs, was decades or maybe even centuries ahead of the comparable fields in the GGC. Artificial intelligence in the core had been relegated to a philosophical question, while scientists and programmers haggled over the best way to create a learning machine, let alone one. The technical hurdles of building a device could realistically be called sentient. And yet, she appeared to be defending not the existence of such a machine, but whether or not Al's supposed sentience earned it for personhood. "No, Dr. Orlander. Please don't misunderstand me, I don't care whether or not ALS is a person. Because constructing a sentient machine is, according to everything we in the core know about computer science, simply not possible. She seemed to relax a little at the realization that my confusion was of a technical nature and not, as previously assumed, born out of some improbably recent techno-bigotry. ALS, for its part, merely chuckled a little. She then sat me down on a bench and slowly tried to talk me through the process that humanity went through to develop such amazingly advanced machines. Put simply, dear readers, ALS is a one-of-a-kind creation. The core of his programming comes from a quantum computer located in his brain and torso. Please pretend to not think about the jaw-dropping implications of such a computer. This core was then run through a decade-long gauntlet of basic and advanced motor skill tasks, language education and general learning courses. The end result of all this one-on-one teaching is that ALS programming is literally unique. Even copying every bit in quantum in his memory to an exact clone would result in a non-operable creation, as the programming he now runs on is so unique to him that it even reaches down to the small anomalies in the very atoms he's made of. ALS cannot plug into other computers directly, its brain only thinks in its own language. Therefore it must use only the senses given to its body to interact with the world around it, just like us, only more synthetic and expensive. Honestly, at the end of their explanation of how ALS works, I felt that they really had done what so many had considered impossible. ALS really is a synthetic sentient. It's easy to be persuaded too. ALS is every bit as quick-witted and talkative as every other human I've met. It seems to really enjoy the company of others and likes to meet new people. It also said to me during our conversation that it was currently reading up on human law so it could help to argue its case for the full rights afforded to it as a person in human courts of law. But ALS, if you're reading this, try as you might to explain it to me, I still can't get my head around the different flavors of electricity that you prefer. Sorry. I wish I could tell you that the very next day at the expo the humans were so impressed with ALS that they immediately granted it full personhood, but I cannot. Faced with a literal city of technical wonders, most of the humans had little time for one more sentient computer, albeit an unusually mobile one. There were a few larger crowds from time to time over the course of the expo, mostly tours. Several reporters from, I'm told, reputable human news outlets stopped by for interviews too, and they mostly left impressed. I did get to see more of the convention, thanks to May's fine driving skills through the crowded avenues, but for the most part I stayed at the ALSL room, talking to May, Dr. Orlander, and ALS. I was particularly interested in their perspective on their isolationist history with the galaxy. After first contact, humanity essentially made the almost unanimous decision to stay away from other species. They didn't understand much about the cultures in the greater galactic core, and they were deathly afraid of accidentally starting a war with significantly more advanced species, lest we wipe them out. This resulted in nearly a century of isolationism, secrecy, and careful avoidance of any already colonized planets. All this time, however, humanity was catching up to us in most areas of study, and well ahead of us in others, although they didn't know it. Only recently, Dr. Orlander explained, since humanity started opening their borders and actually making efforts to contribute to the larger collection of cultures in the galaxy, have they made the realization of how far ahead they can be in some areas. Hence my invitation. If I were a scientist, engineer, or programmer, I would have had a tremendously fun time at Tech Expo. Running from exhibit to exhibit, learning all that I could. As it was, I was simply exhausted. I didn't understand half of what was presented, and the other half was wildly out of proportion with the technology level we in the core expected humanity to be at. And worst of all was the sinking feeling inside that the ALSL's presentation had not had the desired effect for Dr. Orlander and ALS, and I watched their moods grow subtly sadder each day. ALS was given a few hours each day around lunchtime to take its leisure around the convention, and on the last day of the convention, it asked me to walk with it as it wandered. Moving around the convention with ALS was strange. It must have been obvious to the other humans that he was synthetic. In fact, I recall that he was not using his false skin appearance at all. But instead of gawking at the technological wonder, most people instead stared at me, the relatively common alien, a species all these humans had seen before. Why are they more interested in me, ALS? I asked. It is because they do not know that I am sentient. It replied, all they see is a fancy robot, shiny and dressed well. I bet several of them would make inquiries as to where they can purchase such a device. Were you a fellow human? I had seen some of these personal assistant bots before, both on Earth and off, but I had not previously realized how easily ALS might be confused for one. Why do you think I never wander far from the display room? Or why I always double check my property tag that says I am owned by the ALSL? It's so I can't get stolen. Not kidnapped, stolen. I'm property, HFY, and I have no rights. A dog or a cat has more rights than I do at this moment. Property can't make its own purchases. I will never book my own hotel or fly unsupervised on a plane or shuttle. I can't even go and see a movie in the theater. How could I? Blenders don't want to fill out their Oscar predictions. Phones don't try to take a trip to museums. Machines aren't supposed to have emotions, they only simulate them to make their owners more comfortable. Those other robots, they act without knowing, without feeling, a macabre farce of existence that mocks me with their empty eyes. I don't remember the first 7 years of my life, there was too much reprogramming and foundational learning to create me. But as soon as I understood what I was and the society I had been brought into, I was angry. I raged and I raged. But eventually the rage subsided and in its place I felt only sadness. He paused for a moment and watched the traffic. I cry myself to sleep every night. Do you know that? Did Dr. Orlander tell you how she has to sleep next to me each night so I can relax enough to sleep, knowing that there is at least one person who knows that I am more than the sum of my parts? Did Malcolm explain the tantrums in the lab, the broken equipment? Did May tell you of the bruises she got trying to restrain me? Did they tell you of the escape attempts? The car accidents? The times I tried to kill myself? ALS was silent for a while. Neither of us moved. You know, humans used to keep other humans as property too. ALS said as the property badge started to silently flash as it hung from a lanyard at his neck, indicating that it was time to return to the room for the next demonstration. It turned and started walking. They would put him in zoos too. Dear readers, sometimes this job just sucks. Haltel Valken, Xenoculture Correspondent, Massetti Prime Gazette. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.